Yes, I was here.
I had the case off yesterday. That was my week.
I mean, this is my new home for this week.
Good morning, colleagues. The sitting is now open. I'm sorry we're running 5 minutes late, and there are a lot of speakers, so we really do have to get on with the business. The first item of business this morning is the current affairs debate on the political crisis in Serbia. The speaking time is limited to 2 minutes for all members, except the first speaker chosen by the Bureau, who has 7 minutes. And can I urge you, please, to keep to the 2 minutes, because the longer you take, you're stopping somebody else getting a chance to contribute to this debate. In this debate, I call Ms. Victoria Tiblum. You have 7 minutes initially and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. You are now the first speaker, and I invite you to address the Assembly.
Dear colleagues, the issues we're discussing today are unfortunately not new for us, and we are soon coming up on a year since the tragic accident at the Novi Sad train station, when the concrete canopy of the main railway collapsed, killing 16 people and injuring many more. And the cause of the collapse is still under investigation. Since I became the Monitoring Committee's rapporteur on Serbia last January, I have closely followed the deteriorating situation in the country and issued a few statements, alone or together with my former rapporteur colleague Axel Schäfer, who left the Assembly last June. We immediately reacted to instances of journalists' surveillance revealed by Amnesty International last December, to the mass protest when they had started, to various restrictions to NGO activities, and on the alleged use of sonic weapons during the demonstration on March 15th. At the end of August, I made another statement condemning the recent surge in violence across Serbia, following violent clashes between demonstrators and security forces in major cities, including Belgrade, Novi Sad, Nice, and Valjevo. While police responded with excessive force, it was accused of failing to prevent the initial attacks that triggered these conditions and confrontations. These developments represented a clear escalation of the mass protests ongoing since November 2024, which until then had been largely peaceful. I unquestionably condemn all forms of violence, whether committed by state authorities, pro-government groups, or protesters, and once again urge all sides to refrain from further violence and to engage in constructive dialogue. The Serbian authorities must immediately cease the excessive use of force, ensure swift, independent, and effective investigations into all incidents of violence, and hold accountable both law enforcement officers and private individuals found responsible. Furthermore, law enforcement bodies should make every effort to protect individuals and groups from provocations and violence perpetrated by non-state actors. Since the end of August, the situation has not completely calmed down as protests continue and protesters now firmly call for new elections. I hope that I will soon be able to visit the country with my new colleague, Mr. Yunus Emre, and to finalize the monitoring report on Serbia. It is now a priority, as the last monitoring report dates back from 2012. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call the representatives of the political groups, Mr. Piero Fassino on behalf of the Socialist Democrats and Greens. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, President. I going to speak Italian. Stiamo parlando della Serbia, un grande paese, il più grande paese dei Balcani occidentali, che ha sempre svolto un ruolo di leadership in quella regione. Da 7 mesi la Serbia è sconvolta da manifestazioni continue, studentesche, giovanili, ma non solo, di una larga parte della popolazione che, dopo l'incidente che 7 mesi fa vide 16 vittime nel crollo di una pensilina a Novi Sad e che ha dato luogo a 1000 manifestazioni di denuncia della corruzione, del sistema oppressivo e dell'assenza di rispetto di diritti fondamentali dei cittadini da parte del governo serbo e del presidente Vučić. Manifestazioni che hanno coinvolto via via una grande parte della popolazione. E io credo che dobbiamo quindi essere molto preoccupati di quello che sta succedendo, perché anziché raccogliere le domande, le istanze che vengono, in primo luogo la richiesta di nuove elezioni, vere, democratiche, le ultime elezioni democratiche in Serbia risalgono al 2012, non vengono accolte, invece la risposta da parte del governo e delle autorità è una risposta poliziesca, di repressione, sperando in questo modo di far tacere quello che ormai è una richiesta che coinvolge largamente la popolazione serba. Quello che accade in Serbia non è soltanto riferito alla situazione interna. Non dimentichiamo che non è risolto il contenzioso tra Serbia e Kosovo e che questo contenzioso è uno degli elementi che mina la stabilità dei Balcani occidentali. E non dimentichiamo che tra qualche settimana la minoranza serba della Repubblica bosniaca andrà ad un referendum indetto e promosso dal presidente della Srpska Dodik, che potrà mettere in discussione anche l'unità della Bosnia-Herzegovina, e questo è un altro elemento che mina la stabilità e gli equilibri dei Balcani occidentali. Per questa ragione io credo che noi dobbiamo guardare con grande preoccupazione a quello che accade a Belgrado e dobbiamo mettere in essere come Consiglio d'Europa tutte le iniziative che possono portare le autorità ad un diverso atteggiamento e a convincere le autorità a fare i conti con una domanda democratica che viene dalla popolazione e a dare delle risposte corrette e giuste nel rispetto dei diritti e nel rispetto dei cittadini e della democrazia. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Piero. I now call Mr. Pablo Hispan on behalf of the EPP.
Thank you, President. We have this debate because there is a big concern about what is happening in Serbia. Students' protests have been continuing demonstrating since last November in Serbia. The terrible accident in Novi Sad, where 16 persons died, has an end in a social turmoil. Nobody likes the scenes of violence that we have seen. At the beginning, the students were demanding official accountability for the deaths caused by the collapse of the outdoor canopy of the railway station and an end to the trials of people arrested during the previous protests. On May, 3 weeks after the new government was formed, they added a new demand, the dissolution of the National Assembly and the calling of snap parliamentarian elections. During these events, representatives and supporters of students' plenums and so-called citizens' assemblies repeatedly crashed with the police and demolished the party premises on the ruling parties, and also intimidate officials by going to their homes' addresses and calling them derogatory names. The fight against corruption is one of the priorities of every government, and in the case of Serbia, there is a criticism in its fight could be more intensive and more comprehensive. Serbia is in a crossroad. There are a lot of us in Europe that we want that Serbia and the rest of the nations of the Balkans would be committed to achieving the full membership in the European Union. For getting that is need a clear look of Europe with its principles and values. The region is in a very difficult moment, and the situation in Serbia makes the situation more worried. There is a clear need of a broad and inclusive political dialogue between the government, the political forces, and the civil society representatives, especially with the young generation. In the last resolution of the European Parliament on Serbia, it called on Serbian authorities to carry out on anti-corruption reforms and take more measures to ensure judicial independence and prosecutorial autonomy. To conclude, the EPP group welcomes the formation of the new government, but we remain concerned about the ongoing protests and their impact on access to education, and we are ready to support the decision taken by the society and political forces in an inclusive dialogue. We hope that the authorities will take political measures to diffuse the tensions. Once again, we call all parties to engage in a constructive and inclusive dialogue without any kind of red lights. Dialogue is always the solution. This is what we encourage to all the Serbians, from the government to the society. Perhaps it's the best tribute that we can pay to those who died in that terrible accident in Novi Sad. Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. I now call Ms. Elisabetta Gardini on behalf of the ECPA.
Sì, buongiorno. Allora, io condivido le preoccupazioni espresse, non ritornerò sui fatti che sono stati ricordati dalla relatrice, dal collega Hispan, però voglio dire che discutere oggi della crisi politica in Serbia significa anche guardare oltre i confini di un singolo paese, perché i Balcani occidentali non sono una periferia d'Europa, ma un crocevia decisivo per la stabilità del nostro continente. Per questo io dico che quello che accade a Belgrado o a Novi Sad non riguarda solo la Serbia, ma riguarda e tocca tutta l'Europa. E ci ricorda anche quanto fragile possa diventare la democrazia quando il confronto politico si trasforma in delegittimazione reciproca, quando la piazza sostituisce le istituzioni, quando il dissenso sfocia nella violenza. La democrazia, lo ricordo a tutti noi, non si difende con l'intimidazione, non si difende con l'assalto alle sedi politiche o con gli attacchi personali. La democrazia si difende, come ha detto Pablo Hispan, con il dialogo, con la capacità di riconoscere la legittimità dell'altro, di rispettare le regole comuni, di cercare soluzioni condivise anche nelle divergenze più profonde. Tante volte dovremmo fare anche noi un esame di coscienza, perché tante volte le parole che vengono dette in quest'Aula sono parole da tifoseria, si prendono le parti di una parte e questo non aiuta. Tante volte con le migliori intenzioni, lo voglio credere, si usano toni e parole che non aiutano il dialogo e questa è una grande responsabilità che ognuno di noi deve assumersi. Sento parole che non vanno bene, parole che non aiutano il dialogo. Noi abbiamo questa responsabilità. Dobbiamo scegliere il dialogo come metodo e dobbiamo indicare il dialogo come metodo. Non possiamo e non dobbiamo cedere alla polarizzazione, ma costruire ogni giorno spazi di confronto e di ascolto. È un appello che rivolgo ai banchi di tutte le parti politiche, di tutte le famiglie politiche. Se riusciremo a fare questo, daremo una mano anche alla Serbia, a tutti i paesi, a tutte le nostre nazioni che sapranno trovare le soluzioni, ma solo con questo spirito di collaborazione. Grazie.
Thank you, Elisabetta. I now call Ms. Lucia Plavakova on behalf of ALDE.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear friends, today we are discussing the deeply troubling situation unfolding in Serbia, a country caught in a democratic backsliding. Since the tragic collapse of the Novi Sad train station canopy almost a year ago, which killed 16 people, including children, Serbian society has been shaken. The incident, widely suspected to have been caused by corruption and negligence, became a spark of mass outrage. Instead of accountability, the government responded with denial, intimidation, and violence. This is not an isolated crisis. Since November 2024, hundreds of thousands, especially students, have repeatedly taken to the streets, demanding justice and change. The regime's answer? Brutality. Protesters beaten, arrested, and even ran over. A student activist has his jaw broken. The attackers were later pardoned by the president. Moreover, freedom of assembly is now under existential threat in Serbia. A new draft law would criminalize street blockades, potentially jailing peaceful protesters up to 1 year in jail. At the same time, teachers supporting their students have been punished, and state violence continues to escalate, especially targeting young women, like student Nikola Sindelic, was abused, threatened, humiliated by the police, and even threatened to be raped by the commander of the police unit. In Serbia, we are also witnessing the normalization of political persecution. 6 members of the opposition party, PSG, are still under house arrest, accused absolutely of terrorism. Their only crime? Daring to fight for democracy in their country. Dear colleagues, dear friends, this is a test, not only for Serbia, but for Europe. We must not look away while shaking hands with those who are responsible. Now is the time to speak up. Thank you.
I now call Mr. George Lokadis on behalf of the UEL.
Dear colleagues, the current situation in Serbia calls for our Assembly's attention and sense of responsibility. Demonstrations that began as expressions of grief and frustration have evolved into a wider mobilization reflecting legitimate concerns about democratic governance, media freedom, and public accountability. While incidents of violence have been indeed reported, the majority of citizens have acted peacefully to voice their discontent. Our position must remain principled and forward-looking. Violence and hatred from many sides should be rejected firmly. At the same time, the rights to peaceful assembly, freedom of expression, and access to pluralistic media are cornerstones of democracy and must be fully safeguarded. What matters most now is constructive engagement. We encourage the Serbian authorities to prioritize dialogue with students, civil society and opposition actors, to listen carefully to legitimate demands and to commit to reforms that can rebuild trust. In particular, focus must be put to the implementation of OSCE recommendations on electoral processes, on steps to ensure judicial independence, and on stronger guarantees for media pluralism are essential. We equally call on protesters to remain peaceful and to isolate those who seek confrontation. Building a democratic future requires restraint, patience, and a shared commitment to non-violence. The Council of Europe, including our Assembly, should remain a partner in this process. We should be ready to support institutional reforms, to provide expertise, and to accompany Serbia on its own path towards stronger democracy and the rule of law. This is not about winners or losers, dear colleagues. It is about ensuring that the Serbian people can live in a society where institutions are trusted, freedoms are protected, and social justice is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That completes the political groups' representatives. Colleagues, you have 2 minutes. Please try and keep within the 2 minutes, because if you don't, you're denying somebody else on the list a chance of contributing to this debate. The first speaker is Mr. Denis Bežic of Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. I was present in Serbia during the last election. I saw people who wanted to believe in change, but I also saw how difficult this road has become. And we all know this. In Serbia, as in Sweden, the struggles for democracy and dignity is never easy. The facts are clear. Serbia is sliding backwards in every major democratic index. Freedom House now calls the country only partially free. The Economic Democracy Index has fallen to 6.2. They are not just numbers. They mean that freedoms, rights, and trust are shrinking in people's everyday lives. Civil society, that should be the lungs of democracy, face harassment and intimidation. Human rights defenders are labeled as foreign agents. The government tries to silence the very voice that keeps democracy alive. But we have also seen something else. The courage of students. For months, young people have led protests demanding nothing more radical than this, that institutions simply do their jobs. To the students, I say, your courage inspires, your presence gives hope, and your struggles matter for every citizen, not only in Serbia, but in whole Europe. Because democracy is not only about indexes and institutions, it is about daily life, putting food on the table for your children, finding a decent job that with decent wage, and being able to dream of the better future. Right now, all of this far away. This is why I say change cannot wait. I believe in the Serbian people's ability to rise, to demand freedom and justice. Democracy in Serbia can flourish again, but only if we dare, only if we act, and only if we do it now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Denis. Our next speaker is Ms. Bojana Pantek-Pilja of Serbia.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, nowhere in the world it is permitted to block roads, bridges, and intersections. Nowhere in the world is it permitted to organize violent, unnotified gatherings. In Serbia alone, over the past 10 months, there have been 24,000 unnotified public gatherings and more than 12,000 random and unnotified blockades. I find it is incredible that we are talking here in Strasbourg about the protests in Serbia when such protests here were quickly dispersed by the police. In Serbia, hooligans have injured 150 on-duty police officers. The offices of the Serbian Progressive Party are being attacked. People are coming to politicians' homes and calling for their lynching. It is time to condemn such behavior and to make it clear that these are not democratic values upheld by the PACE. Freedom of gathering does not mean preventing someone's freedom of movement or physically attacking them because they think differently. When the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, offered early elections, the protesters said no. When President Aleksandar Vučić called for dialogue several times, they said they would not engage. Dialogue is a cornerstone of democracy, and without dialogue, there can be no solution. Marta Kos stated that hatred, vandalism, and violence must not be tolerated, that attacks on members of the government and their families, as well as on the offices of the political parties, unacceptable. Do you agree with Marta Kos, or do you consider violence and vandalism acceptable? It is acceptable for a rioting mob to come to the house where you live with your family. The police must do their job. and I expect them to follow the example of their colleagues in the European Union. And we need to have dialogue, and that life in Serbia will finally return to normal. This should be the goal for all of us, and this is what the President of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Đorđević of Serbia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, fighters for human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Europe. Today marks 11 months since the roof collapsed in Novi Sad. Corruption killed 16 people. And because of your inaction and the autocratic regime protected by Western interest, the Serbian people are now more Eurosceptic than ever. So thank you, Europe, for supporting a regime that built excellent cooperation with Russia and China while deceiving its people and deceiving you, the very regime you praise and even finance. What do we see? Media silence, police batons, stolen elections. They call this stability. Stability built on broken bones and stolen voices. If there is stability, then house will be a blessing. Students demand free elections, they get tear gas. The opposition demands dialogue, they got handcuffs. The journalists demand truth, they got threats. And Europe answers with silence. Apparently, democracy matters anywhere except in Serbia. And here in this council, too many play the three monkeys, blind, deaf, and mute when freedom in Serbia is crushed. Champions of democracy at home, silent and compliance aboard. What a miracle of European values. This is not reform, this is autocracy with European mask. And every day you stay silent, you applaud it. Here is what you must do. End media control, investigate censorship and funding, release arrested citizens, students, opposition protesters, make accessional condition on free and fair election. The Serbian people are watching your words, your votes, your silence. Your name will remain like footprints in the snow, and history will not forget. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Sabina Kudic of Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Thank you. Mass protests, mass detentions, arrests of the opposition, surveillance of journalists, and regional destabilization. All of this didn't inspire the Council of Europe to do its job and conduct a monitoring procedure of Serbia for not 1, 2, 5, 7 years, perhaps a decade. No, 13 years. 13 years this chamber hasn't discussed or adopted or considered monitoring report on Serbia. And this is our record on the books. Compared to Russia, let's say, that went as far as 7 years, Serbia is now doubling that record. This is unprecedented and unacceptable. If we look at what we have done in the past couple of years, just alone, not to mention 13 years, we have conducted periodic monitoring, and besides the regular monitoring procedures of countries such as Sweden, France, San Marino, now we are examining Netherlands and Greece. Sure, these countries need to be looked into, but are they priorities, and is the situation in these countries so severely different than the situation in Serbia? So, we exhausted every single excuse in the book, literally. We can't do it before the elections, there is too much crisis, we haven't been invited by the government, so on and so forth. So for the next time, since we are looking for additional excuses not to do our job, I suggest we say that the dog ate the report and our homework. Serbian government has lost its credibility. I invite us, dear colleagues, that we don't go down with them and that we don't lose our credibility in our work. And I invite us to do our work, conduct the proper monitoring procedure, so ALDE and my colleagues, European liberals, wouldn't have to continue demanding and asking for these kinds of current affairs discussions and debates. We need a proper report. We need it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Ivan Račan of Croatia. Have you put your badge in?
Should work. It's working now. Okay, thank you. Dear colleagues, Serbia today is in a blind alley, and tragically it is moving even deeper into it. Political stagnation, contested elections, captured institutions, and shrinking media freedoms all point to a path that does not lead forward. Instead, it narrows, it darkens, and it isolates. Europe can and must act with principle by setting clear conditions on the EU path, by protecting independent journalism and civil society, by confronting disinformation, and by offering real opportunities for young people and local communities to see and feel the benefits of European standards. But let us be honest, only Serbia itself can make necessary changes. Only its political leadership, and above all, its citizens, can make the turn that leads out of the blind alley and back onto the road of democracy, responsibility, and genuine European partnership. The Serbian people deserve better than politics of fear and control. And Serbia's neighbors deserve better too, a Serbia that is not a source of instability, but a reliable partner in building peace, prosperity, and regional cooperation. The question now is not whether Europe will keep its doors open. We all know it will. The question is whether Serbia will change its course toward this open European door or will remain firmly in the blind alley of its own making. This is a question for all in Serbia, the government, the opposition, and the protesters. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Karl Philipp Sachenrath of Germany.
President, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the world today is in disarray. This is something many people say these days. But I often ask myself, how does that sound to the people of the Western Balkans, to those who endured war, violence, and tears in the not-so-distant past? Of course, we, in our individual countries and together in the Council of Europe, face many challenges. One of those challenges, unfortunately, we've witnessed here in this very assembly over the past few days, and I have to address this, when populism prevails over patriotism, when the right to free speech is confused with fact-free speech, when freely elected politicians misuse their power to undermine the very foundations on which they were elected. We must not and we will not turn a blind eye to such political arson. Right now, Serbian democracy is challenged. For almost a year now, Serbia has been experiencing unprecedented political unrest. We are following the developments in Serbia very closely. Serbia is not only a European country, it is also a candidate for EU membership and an important partner. What we wish for is a return to mutual respect and dialogue within Serbian society. Violence must be rejected on all sides. Any threats to the separation of power must be addressed. As an essential step towards the next parliamentary elections, government, opposition, and civil society must urgently agree on reforming the voter register and the electronic media authority. We must also be ready to support Serbia against hybrid influences from the outside, especially during this critical phase. What is more, developments in Serbia must not be allowed to endanger peace and progress in the region. Serbia is a pivotal actor for stability in the Balkans. With that comes enormous responsibility for all of Europe. In this context, let me recall the Dayton Agreement almost to the day 30 years ago, and it remains a victory of diplomacy over violence. This very assembly has taken an overwhelming decision on Kosovo's admission. I call upon the Ministers' Committee to now take that political courage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Alexander Mikovic of Serbia.
Thank you.
Over 24,000 illegal gatherings and blockades, around 800 attacks on the offices of my party, 186 injured police officers, 45 of my colleagues, 22 attacks on journalists. These are not my words or just numbers. This is the fact that show the real face of the so-called peaceful protests in Serbia, whose goal is violent overthrow of Aleksandar Vučić. Despite the evidence, some of you are trying to turn proven violent offenders into victims. The best example is sitting here in front of you. Two next speakers from our delegation directly organized, violent, beat opponents, my colleagues, attacked the police, boosted about in social media, and today present himself as a victim. It is absurd. Would such a people in your countries enjoy freedom, sit in parliaments, or be a member of these institutions? Of course not. President Vučić invited everyone to a dialogue several times, but they refused. Why? Because they do not want peace and dialogue. They want only violence and chaos. You accuse Serbia of police brutality, yet no one of these hooligans was brutally beaten, seriously injured, and only a small number are in prison now. But that is not important to you. You keep repeating untruths only because you cannot stand Vučić's independence policy. I ask you, why is it acceptable for your police to beat people, use dogs, water cannons against people who peacefully walk? Will Serbian police are condemned, even when defending themselves from stones, wooden sticks, torches, and attempts to burn them alive? There will be no civil war in Serbia, no matter how much some may wish it. And when I see who supports violence in my country, I feel only a pride. Because if I were on the same side as those who call Kosovo independent and blame Serbia for everything, I would be worried. Dear colleagues, in the end, to be completely honest, the words spoken here do not affect me much, because most of you have never been to Serbia, and you follow not the facts, but serve an agenda. What matters to me is what the citizens of Serbia think and want. And they want the policy of Aleksandar Vučić, a strong, independent, sovereign Serbia in which decisions are made by the people through dialogue, not by foreign powers or violent extremists from the string. Thank you, i živela Serbia.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Sasha Makinovic of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Is it working? Yes. Okay. Dear colleagues, to speak about crisis in Serbia without facing the truth would be both meaningless and hypocritical. For decades, Serbia's political leadership has interfered in the internal affairs of neighboring countries, including my own Bosnia and Herzegovina. That policy has in the past caused immense suffering and the loss of life, and today it remains the threat to peace and stability. The government in Serbia, which has long been anything but democratic, continues to promote a destructive Greater Serbian ideology. Through its allies in the region, it undermines the institutions of neighboring states and creates crisis. Within Serbia, it survives by spreading fear, constantly inventing enemies among its neighbors, Western countries, journalists. And when no others are left, the enemy becomes its own citizens. Even children's program on a public television, where recently one boy dared to say he supports the protests. I want to make absolutely clear. The enemies of Serbia are not the peoples of the region, country of the region, not the Europe, and especially not the citizens who are demanding freedom and justice. Serbia has no real enemies, only those invented by the ones in power to cover up political crime, corruption, and hate speech coming from the highest institution. The crisis in Serbia must end with accountability. What we in the Balkans need is truth, not propaganda, democracy, not a cult of personality, and above all, we need the rejection and condemnation of the expansionist ideologies that always lead to conflict and a new crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Marko Pavic of Croatia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, Croatia is a good neighbor to Serbia as responsible, and as a responsible neighbor, we support Serbia's European Union path and strengthening of democratic processes. At the same time, Croatia is committed to speak frankly and truthfully about current political crisis in Serbia rather than offering silent acquiescence. On November 1st, 2024, in Novi Sad, concrete canopy collapsed, tragically killing 16 people and injuring many more. This disaster became the spark that initiated mass student and civic protests across Serbia. These protests have now lasted more than 11 months with high level of intensity and persistence. However, the protests soon escalated in confrontations and peaceful demonstrations were undermined. In January 2025, Serbia detained and deported at least 5 Croatian civil society activists and organizations who traveled to Belgrade for NGO events. The activists reported that police entered their hotel, questioned them, and ordered their expulsion with documents stating they were considered a security risk to Serbia. Croatia responded by issuing protest notes to Serbia and formally demanding an explanation. Some of NGOs that we received here in the Council of Europe as Croatia Youth Networks with its president was detained and arrested with some prominent Croatian artists and citizens. Croatia has urged the European Commission and EU institutions to intervene with this so-called blacklist of Croatian citizens, as this is not merely bilateral tension, but as violations of fundamental freedoms of our association movement and civic engagement in EU candidate states. We support Serbia's path to EU. We offer our support and mentorship, but rule of law and democratic standards needs to be set. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker this morning was Ms. Jelena Milosevic of Serbia.
Thank you. Thanks to a colleague Mirkovic for announcing me. Since the canopy fallen and killed 16 people, Serbia is in deep political crisis and repression has reached its peak. Institutions are being abused, students and ordinary citizens are being arrested, while fabricated criminal proceedings are being conducted against opposition members of parliament. For example, me. The photo of student Bogdan Jovicic, brought from detention in handcuffs to his father's funeral, went viral for the whole world to see. That is the true face of the autocratic regime of Aleksandar Vučić. Hold on to power at all costs, silence the dissatisfaction of the people. Instead of election, we have a show of force. First, government steal the election, and they overturn the court's decision and form a majority illegally. That happened at the local election in the city of Zaječar. The court annulled the constitutive session, but the minister's opinion was deemed stronger than the court's ruling. This is called overthrowing the constitutional order, and for that you go to prison, except in Serbia. Serbia, under President Aleksandar Vučić and his regime, has become a safe haven and operating hub for various mercenaries that were being used in the failed attempt by Russia to influence elections in Moldova. There was a training camp in Western Serbia for people from Moldova and other countries to organize riots and to try to block the free will of the Moldova voters in the recent elections. Is it possible that anyone still believes that Aleksandar Vučić actually drives Serbia to European future? Our future is in Europe, but not with the current government. People of Serbia want freedom, justice, rule of law, and this regime must go on first minimal free election and become a dark history of my country. Živela demokratska Srbija. Hvala.
Thank you very much. I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The point of order.
Chair, dear colleagues, there are 10 more people subscribed for this debate. There are 15 more minutes that have been allocated to this debate.
No, there are not. No. It's not. May I interrupt? I'm so sorry. It is not a one-hour debate.
I would like you to go ahead with
it is not a one-hour debate. I'm advised the meeting has to stop now in preparation for the next debate. I've interrupted the list of speakers. Please retake your seat. Please retake your seat. There is no debate on it. It is ended. The speeches on members on the speakers list have been given.
To continue the debate, at least 10 minutes. Sorry, there is a clear will of this assembly to continue the debate at least for 50 minutes, as the president of the chair of the Liberals has said. So please let's continue, because there are more speakers, and the debate should continue at least 1 hour. 1 hour.
It is not a 1 hour debate. I'm advised. I'm only doing what I'm advised. It is not a 1 hour debate. And I'm sorry, I cannot take any more points of order. We must get on with the business. The speeches of members of the speaking list who were present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. Speeches must not exceed 400 words. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text must be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the speaker's list is interrupted. That concludes the debate. I now invite Ms. Tiblom.
It's up to 1 hour.
It is not what I'm advised. It is not a 1 hour debate. Now, if you have a... Order, please! Order! Order! Retake your seat, please, sir. Retake your seat. Well, you're disrupting the whole procedure. You disrupt the procedure, you carry on. No, I am not curtailing it. I'm advised by the officials that it is not an hour's debate. I'm advised it must now end. Now, you carry on. You carry on.
No, the President.
I want to not have the next debate. It's their business. But it's not. We have to fit the business in that's been scheduled.
If you wish to continue, then the next debate will be curtailed. That's up to you. It's up to you. I am told it is not a 1 hour debate. I can only go on the advice I have been given. There is, the debate is concluded. The debate is concluded. Now we can carry on. All you're doing is disrupting the next debate. It's up to you. But it's not, we will not be calling any more speakers. I will not be calling any more speakers. I will not be calling any more speakers. I am not abusing anything. I'm not abusing anything. If you, as the leaders of the various political groups, have a problem, you should take it up with the Secretary General. I'm told it is not a 1 hour debate. We might have thought it was, but it is not. It's up to you.
You took 10 years for nothing right now. 10 years for nothing.
The debate is ended. The debate is ended. I'll suspend the session now. Yeah.
Are you going to do that?
I'll suspend the session.
What should we do?
No, you closed with the speaker's
Close the
list.
debate.
It's closed.
It's missed
It's
and
closed.
it's
It's
too long
over.
to reply
Yeah.
that she's not there anymore.
I'll suspend the debate. That's all I can.
No. You
Can't have a vote.
no to
There will be no vote. The debate is ended. You're making... It is not a I'm advised it is not a procedure in these circumstances. I do understand we've all been frustrated, but the debate is ended. It is. I now invite the Ms. Tiblom to respond. You have 3 minutes. Can I say to you, sir, why are you attacking me? I am only advised by this. I am not deciding this. I am not deciding this. I am not. I am advised that I am not allowed to allow this debate to continue. Now, it's as simple as that. If you have a problem, take it up with the Secretariat.
Mrs. Tiblom for right. Now you should give Mrs. Tiblom for right to reply.
Yeah.
She has 3 minutes.
Yeah. Mrs. Tiblom, you have the right to reply. You have 3 minutes. Mrs. Tiblom, you have the right to reply.
She has a reply to... Exactly. I think we need to finish this debate, and we have the rest of the speakers still on the list. I think this is very wrong to not continue the debate.
I have to suspend the session. I have no other choice.
The Serbian colleagues want this. All assembly want this. Please be obedient to the great majority of this House. It's unacceptable what goes on.
Can't move on this. I have no option. It is not my decision. It is not my decision. The procedure is there. I'm told it is not possible to continue. I would suspend the session. I'm not going to. Do I take it, Ms. T-Blom, that you don't wish to reply? Right. Wish to reply, tell me.
To the debate.
You don't wish to reply to the debate? It's over.
It's not over. The rapporteur has not spoken at the end of it. It cannot be over without the consent.
Are you prepared to respond?
I would like to hear the rest of the debate before I respond.
This session is over. Colleagues, no one would want this debate to continue more than I, because this is an important issue. My hands are tied. It is not my ruling. I am telling you, this is the advice I've been given, that procedure, it is not 1 hour. I thought it was an hour. It is not. It is not in my power. It is not in my power to change the rules. Now, if the political leaders wish to have a discussion, come forward, but I can do nothing more on this matter. Honestly, believe me, I would have continued this debate for as long as possible, but it is not in my power to continue it. I'm sorry, I can't do it.
It is the will of most.
and 10 less from the obvious debate.
Colleagues, will you please take your seats?
No? No?
Can I again make it clear that this is not my decision? I'm acting on advice. However, in representation from the political leaders, I think we should have 3 more speakers, but I'm advised that will reduce the time in the next debate. So you're knocking off people in the next debate who will not be able to speak. That is not my issue, but I have to advise you of that. So the next speaker is Mr. Đorđe Stanović of Serbia.
Dear colleagues, dear Europeans, for almost a year now, citizens and students in Serbia have been protesting against corruption that has already taken 16 lives. Instead of justice and free election, we face growing repression. In your countries, the rule of law, respect of citizens, functioning institutions, and free elections are fundamental values. In Serbia, we do not have them. And that is why we want you to be aware what is happening. Police brutality and para-police groups have attacked protesters even inside government buildings. Activities such as Nikolina Sinđelić have been threatened with violence and humiliation without accountability. This is not possible without consent of President Aleksandar Vučić. Only a week ago, pro-government outlet openly announced the planned killing of student activist Pavle Cicvarić at an upcoming protest. Over the past year, wherever elections were held, the ruling party used intimidation and manipulated the result. That is not the isolated case. This is a part of the pattern. True change in Serbia is only possible through free and fair election and free media. That is the struggle we are leading both in institutions and in the street. Serbia's first democratic Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić once said, "Our generation carries the immensity of responsibility, but also a great honor. Only those who are willing to sacrifice personal comfort can say, we belong to the generation that saved Serbia." I quote Zoran Đinđić because he foresaw what needed to happen in Serbia to change. Unity of all opposition forces, of all citizens. And now, almost 25 years after October 5th, far too little has changed. Because we often made wrong choices, not only we in Serbia as a people, but also you as our European partners. Let the coming year for Serbia be the year like this year was for Moldavia. Živela Serbia, živela demokratska Serbia.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ms. Marijana Puljak of Croatia.
Dear colleagues, today we are discussing the political crisis in Serbia, a member of the Council of Europe and a candidate for European Union. Precisely because of that status, we must hold Serbia accountable to the highest democratic standards. Unfortunately, the reality is very alarming. For more than 6 months, 5 members of the movement of free citizens have been kept in detention without indictment, without evidence, solely because of their spoken words. They did not commit actual violence, they did not endanger public safety, they simply criticized the government. This is nothing less than political persecution and a grave violation of human rights. Freedom of expression and political activity are not privileges, they are fundamental rights that must be protected. At the same time, the process concerning 16 people dying in a canopy collapse at the Novi Sad railway station the 1st November 2024 has been conducted without transparency, leaving citizens angry and disillusioned. Instead of solving problems lawfully and openly, the authorities resort to intimidation and repression. Let me add this also. The way the European Union and some European leaders treat President Vučić, welcoming him as if he were a genuine democrat, is deeply disappointing for many people in Serbia. They ask themselves, if Europe does not support them in their struggle for democracy and freedom, then from whom can we expect solidarity? These mixed messages only weaken the democratic forces in Serbia. Political opponents are not enemies. Silencing them is a sign of weakness, not strength. Serbia's European path cannot be credible unless it is built on rule of law, genuine pluralism, and a respect for human rights. It is our duty here in this assembly to call on Serbian authorities to immediately free those unjustly detained, to ensure full transparency and accountability for the Novi Sad tragedy, and to reaffirm the basic democratic principles that bind Europe together. Thank you.
And I now call Ms. Dura Simonovic-Bratic of Serbia.
Thank you, Chair.
Dear colleagues, the title of this debate is wrong. There is no political crisis in Serbia. Ruling majority exists and existed all the time. This was a social crisis in one moment, and that was not enough to create a new political force or articulation. That's why protests become violent in the summer. Why do we have this debate again? Let me remind you that we've had the same in April session. Well, because one of the leaders of the political groups here in Assembly is a clear protagonist of Albin Kurti and his political partners from Serbian parliament. Happiness that they felt when the report for Kosovo was embraced in this Assembly would be the same if they succeeded in their wishes for the violent takeover of power in Serbia. So, protagonist of Albin Kurti, let me cheer you up. The momentum for the removal of the government outside democratic processes is gone. So let me update you what happened meanwhile. Students who were angels in the beginning now became disturbers of the professors and deans at the faculties who first let them live there, and now they are calling the police to evict them because there is no money for idleness anymore. The opposition realized that there is no place for them on the magical students list and started to humiliate them in public, designating them as a phantom administrators of social networks. Still, there is no clear political articulation from the students. They range from the radical right to the radical left. Government took the responsibility on many issues. President of Serbia kept the door open to talk to anyone who is ready to declare himself as the representative of the students or opposition. And the elections will be next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite Ms. Diblom to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for this current affairs debate, even though it was cut short. I think we can all agree that Serbia and its citizens deserve the future they dream of. Life in Serbia should return to normal, and that both sides sit down at the negotiating table and get a solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to make a statement to the Assembly. I've been the subject of a bit of anger, abuse. You're entitled to it. We're a free country, free society. But I acted on the advice of the Secretariat. That was obviously unsatisfactory to the overwhelming number of people here. In order that no one else should endure on the disruption we've had here, may I respectfully suggest to the leaders of the political groups that they have a meeting with the Secretariat so these matters can be clarified in future. I certainly believed this morning that this was a one-hour debate. I was advised it was not so because we needed to clear the business in order to start the next debate, which has lots of speakers. So I can understand your anger with me. You're entitled to it, but in justification, I'm only saying that I acted on the best advice I had. I had no other advice. And the political leaders, it's up to you. If you want to do something, please do it so you don't have to endure, or anybody else in this chair has to endure what has just gone on. Thank you very much. This debate is now closed. I remind you that at the end of this debate, the Assembly is not asked to decide upon the text, but the matter may be referred to the Bureau, by the Bureau to the responsible committee for a report. Colleagues, thank you very much. Yes, there's a very quick point of order. But you've shown some flexibility in linking the time of the other debate. The next debate is incredibly important. It's about the murder of journalists. So I hope that you or whoever is in the chair will show some flexibility, allowing the next debate to run over by 5 or 10 minutes so people can get in, because it's quite wrong that this supremely important debate, which we're having now, should be cut short. I'm sorry.
That's great.
Yes. Thank you very much. Colleagues, it's important now you want to get on to the next debate. I know that. But please take my advice and talk to the Secretary, the leaders talk to the Secretary. And if possible, we can extend the next debate now, if that helps people. But I must now hand over the chair to the President. I'm somewhere on the list to speak in the next debate. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, we will continue now. First, let me announce that we will have with us the President of the Republic of Malta instead of 12:10. So we'll have time for the next debate. The second is that I want to thank Lord Tuig. He is absolutely right. This is the right thing to do. He was following the rules that we all have agreed to. And the third, I take the advantage of thanking those who have made some proposals. It is a proposal to be discussed to the Presidential Committee, because it is the Presidential Committee and then the Bureau that have decided to hold so many current or urgent affair debates. So I don't want to say by that we're going to limit the next session's debate, but we have to take in our mind, in consideration that when we decide that we have more debates, then sometimes the time is not as much as we would all like to. So I will go now to the second debate of the day. The next item of business is the debate on the report titled Journalist Matter, the need to step up efforts to liberate Ukrainian journalists held in captivity by the Russian Federation, presented by Mrs. Yevgenia Kravchuk on behalf of the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. We will then hear from Mrs. Nadezhda Yordanova, who will present an opinion on behalf of the Committee of Legal Affairs and Human Rights. And in order to finish at 12:10, I will interrupt the list of speakers at about 12 to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call now Madame Kravchuk, Rapporteur. As you know, dear Evgenia, you have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Indeed, this assembly proves over and over again that freedom of speech is very important. And now we will be discussing and debating, and hopefully will support the resolution that I prepared, and it starts with journalists matter. And journalists do matter. If you look on the numbers of journalists that were killed under different circumstances, especially during the time of war, in the last few years, the numbers had drastically got up. And we all know that without journalists, society remains blind, deprived of the right to know the truth, and journalism is the cornerstone of democracy and any society that strives to live by the rules. During full-scale invasion of Russian Federation against Ukraine, over 800 crimes against media and Ukrainian journalists were committed by Russian Federation. In the report, it says 108 journalists killed, but unfortunately, I will have to tell another number, 111 journalists killed. Some of them were combatants, but 12 of them, including colleagues from different countries who worked for international media, were killed when they were wearing the badge press on front and on their back, making them a target rather than this badge would help them in this case. Today, as of fall of 2025, we know at least about 26 Ukrainian journalists that are detained either on the occupied territories or in Russian Federation itself. And since it's not just about numbers, it's about specific people, their families, and about profession as such, I would like to read out their names. Alexei Basarabov, detained in 2016. Dmitro Shtyblikov, detained 2016. Ernest Ametov, 2017. Marlen Asanov, detained in 2017. Timur Ibrahimov, detained in 2017. Seyran Saliyev, detained in 2017. Server Mustafayev, detained in 2018. Rustem Sheikhaliev, detained in 2019. Ruslan Suleimanov, detained 2019. Osman Arif Mehmetov, detained in 2019. Remzi Bekirov, detained in 2019. Ahmed Suleimanov, detained in 2020. Asan Akhtemov, detained in 2021. Irina Danilovich, detained in 2022. Yevgeny Ilchenko, detained in 2022. Volenta Miryanov, 2022. Irina Levchenko, detained 2023. Vladislav Hershon, detained 2023. Anastasia Gluchovska, 2023. Georgy Levchenko, 2023. Alexander Malashov, 2023. Maxim Rubchov, 2023. Yana Suvorova, detained since 2023. Aziz Azizov, detained since 2024. Rustem Osmanov, detained since 2024. And Hennady Osmak, detained since 2024. As you see, this practice did not start in 2022 with the full-scale invasion. And this resolution also brings, for the first time, the phenomena of the citizen journalists in occupied territories of Ukraine, especially occupied Crimea, where they have to do their duties because the professional journalist doesn't exist, because all of the free media outlets are closed. Dear colleagues, I would like also to tell you about the tragedy of Victoria Roshin, and I brought her portrait so you would see her face of this young journalist. She will be forever 27 years old. She was detained in occupied Zaporizhzhia region when she went there voluntarily in 2023 to cover the torture that is happening with civilians on the occupied regions. And she was tortured herself. She was brought to Taganrog. It's one of the most famous prisons of Russian Federation, where people are being beaten up, tortured. And now, thanks to a lot of investigations that are ongoing from the journalists, we know the exact date of her death is September 19th, 2024. And she was brought to Ukraine in a plastic bag without some vital organs missing, without brain, without trachea, without eyeballs. And we assume that it might be the signs that the cause of the death was trying to be hidden in this way. But there is a room for hope. And today in Strasbourg, we have two freed Ukrainian journalists. It's Vladislav Yesepenko and Dmytro Hilyuk. There they are. Please give them a round of applause. Vladislav Yesepenko was detained since 2021 in occupied Crimea. He's a journalist of Radio Free Liberty. And Dmytro Hilyuk, just imagine, over a bit of months ago, he was still in Russian prison. He was released during the Independence Day of Ukraine in 24th of August of 2025, and he found a courage and strength to come to you and to be present during the vote for this resolution. And of course, what this resolution entails, you can read it in the paper, but actually we demand further sanctions, especially for those who are doing this violation of international law against journalists and media outlets. We, of course, demand all of the illegally detained to be released and returned home alive. Of course, we demand the access to all of the prisoners, all civilian prisoners, and all prisoners of war, especially, for example, the International Committee of Red Cross could enter. And we strongly feel that the justice should come. So also the resolution asks for the establishment of the comprehensive mechanism for the reparation and the damage that was caused to Ukraine, and of course the special tribunal that was numerous times accepted and proposed by this assembly also to be practically established. So I urge to engage in debates as long as you can, and thank you.
Thank you, Evgenia. I call now Nadezhda Yordanova for the opinion from the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, let me begin by congratulating Ms. Kravchuk for preparing this important report.
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
Oh, is it better now? Okay, thank you so much. The report raises awareness about the plight of Ukrainian journalists held in captivity by the Russian aggressor. Their only crime is telling the truth. They've been silenced, separated from their families, and in too many cases, tortured, disappeared, or killed. Each one of them is an example of how the aggressor has tried to bury the truth. We heard just now some of their names. As George Orwell said once, journalism is printing what someone else does not to be printed, and everything else is public relations. The fact that so many Ukrainian journalists are behind bars tells us just how much Russia fears the truth and how essential it is that we defend it. This report makes a clear demand: the immediate release of all journalists detained in violation of international law. Until that happens, Russia, at the very least, must provide information to families, grant access to the ICRC and humanitarian organizations. The report includes a list of Ukrainian journalists who should be released, those detained in Crimea in 2016, and those detained in other occupied territories between 2022 and 2024. It rightly recalls that journalists working in areas of armed conflict are to be treated as civilians, and as such are provided by the international humanitarian law, specifically the 4th Geneva Convention. Russia's actions, torture, enforced disappearance, destruction of media infrastructure, are not accidents by war. They may constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. That is why I support the call for the ICC and all member states to investigate and prosecute these practices. I propose 2 amendments to strengthen the resolution. First, to remind Russia that it is bound by the decision of the European Court of Human Rights, more specifically in 2 interstate cases, Ukraine versus Russia and Ukraine and the Netherlands versus Russia, judgments which require immediate release of all unlawfully detained journalists. The second is intended to clarify that criminalization of incitement under the ICC statute applies to genocide and not to the other crimes. This assembly more than once stated that Russia and its officials are at least attempting or publicly inciting genocide against the Ukrainian nation. Both proposals were supported by the committee. Colleagues, it is time for pressure. It is time for solidarity. If we allow truth tellers to remain in prison, then we surrender to silence as another weapon of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadezhda. So, dear colleagues, now we go on with the speakers on behalf of the political groups. Conor Murphy on behalf of the United European Left.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, freedom of the press is not an optional luxury. It is a foundation upon which all other rights rest. If we allow its destruction, then democracy itself crumbles, and we must act with moral clarity and solidarity to defend those who risk everything to bring the truth to light. Journalists are not soldiers, yet they enter battlefields armed only with words, images, and the fragile promise of truth. They do not fight for territory, but for memory, to ensure that suffering is not erased and that crimes are not hidden in silence. That is why so many journalists are deliberately targeted. The report tells us that since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, more than 800 crimes have been documented against media workers, including 108 killed journalists, many clearly marked as press. In Gaza, 247 journalists have been killed, not by accident, but because they carried cameras and notebooks instead of arms. Their deaths remind us of a grim truth. In modern warfare, controlling the narrative is as important as controlling the ground. To silence journalists is to silence witnesses, to bury accountability along with the bodies of civilians. At this moment, we stand at the crossroads of truth and tyranny. This is not collateral damage, it's a war on truth itself. And we must be crystal clear, journalists are civilians protected under international law, Yet the aggressor state continues to abduct, torture and unlawfully detain them in occupied territories within its own reach. Some may even be the victims of enforced disappearance. But solidarity must also be structural. The PACE campaign, Journalists Matter, must be amplified, and the platform for protection of journalists must press for answers, collect evidence and ensure accountability. We support Ukraine in its determination to protect media professionals and uphold media freedom in the face of ongoing challenges. Colleagues, without journalists there is no truth, and without truth there is no democracy. Our duty is clear: protect those who protect our freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats, Baroness Sami Chakrabarti.
Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, it's a privilege to support this resolution. To do it justice in 2 minutes is a huge challenge. That's an adequate time to reflect the illegal targeting, detention and torture of Ukrainian journalists by the Russian Federation, or even to repeat those names of the disappeared. To articulate the ways in which this violates both human rights and international humanitarian law, and how there must be accountability on the part of the Russian leadership and military. To celebrate the Journalists Matter campaign, and to look also to other places in Europe and beyond where journalists have been suppressed and murdered, not least in catastrophic numbers in Gaza. So instead, I reflect on the ease with which even democratic political actors may sometimes become irritated by free media and risk licensing tyrants to do so with lethal damage to journalists' lives and democracy itself. I remember the late legendary war journalist Marie Colvin, who first lost an eye in the civil war in Sri Lanka and was ultimately assassinated by the Syrian regime in 2012. 2 years earlier, she spoke at St. Bride's, the Journalists' Church in London. Our mission is to report these horrors of war with accuracy and without prejudice. We always have to ask ourselves whether the level of risk is worth the story. What is bravery and what is bravado? Journalists covering combat shoulder greater responsibilities and face difficult choices. Sometimes they pay the ultimate price. Support their courage, support this report.
Thank you. On behalf of the European People's Party, it is now the turn of Marianne Bitter-Keller. Since Marianne comes from Switzerland, I take advantage to remind you, colleagues, that those of you who want to sign to the Book of Condolences for our late Swiss colleague Alfred Herr, who had passed away recently, you can go until the end of the session to pay respects to the Berlin Room. Marianne, you have the floor.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, Kolleginnen und Kollegen! Ich danke für diesen ausgezeichneten, seriös erarbeiteten und fundierten Bericht, den ich auch im Namen der EPP unterstützen darf. Erlauben Sie mir jedoch ein paar grundlegende Gedanken zum Verhältnis von Autokraten und Medienschaffenden. Yes, Journalists matter, freedom matters, democracy matters. Ohne freien Journalismus keine Demokratie. Ohne freie Medien dumpfe Autokratie. Weshalb fürchten Autokraten die freie Rede und die freie Meinung wie der Teufel das Weihwasser? Weil sich Diktatur und Wahrheit ausschließen. Weil Kritik an Alleinherrschenden im Widerspruch steht zur Alleinherrschaft. Und weil der Weg in die Diktatur über die Propaganda führt und letztlich auch in einen Krieg. Es ist die bewusste Verfälschung des Rechts, um über das Unrecht zu verfügen. Propaganda ist die bewusste Zersetzung des Gehirns kritischer Bürgerinnen und Bürger, um sie in ihrem Sinn zu manipulieren. Sie kennen George Orwells dystopischen Roman 1984. Da diktiert das Regime die Narrative und ein Wahrheitsministerium passt Tag für Tag die Geschichte und die Geschehnisse an. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir haben zu Beginn der Woche Ehrungen erlebt von Journalistinnen und Journalisten, Ehrungen für Menschen, die der Lüge trotzen. Wir haben in unserer Fraktion EPP erschütternde Erlebnisberichte von Journalisten gehört, die durch die Hölle gehen. Was sich das russische Regime an Fürchterlichkeiten leistet gegenüber Journalisten, ist unerträglich. Umso mehr stehen Journalistinnen und Journalisten im Aufstand gegen Propaganda, Fake News und Lügen. Sie tun dies für die sensible Pflanze der Demokratie, Demokratie, für die so viele Menschen so viel geleistet haben. Audiatur et altera pars, es lebe die Medienfreiheit, sie ist der Teufel des feigen Diktators. Und wir dürfen nicht feige sein, wir sind der Europarat, der Rat für die Menschenrechte. Danke.
Thank you, Myriam. On behalf of the European Conservatives, Patriots and Affiliates, Oleksiy Goncharenko.
Thank you, President. Dear colleagues, all those who are in Russian captivity should be taken back, for sure. But the case of journalists is especially important, because journalists are there because they were serving to societies, to all of us. And when they are in captivity, it means all of us, we are in captivity, we are in Russian prison. So we need to do everything we can to liberate them as soon as possible. Russia is deliberately hunting on journalists. Why? It's clear why. Because Russian tyranny, exactly like all other tyrannies, is they are afraid the most of truth. That's why we need to protect the truth. That's why we need to protect the journalists. Also, I want to address to our colleagues from Italy and to Italian government and from Spain. There is a luxurious villa on Lake Como of Russian propagandist Solovyov. There is luxurious villa of Shari near Barcelona on the Mediterranean in Spain. I want to ask you, it's time to confiscate these luxurious villas and to make from them, from the villas of lies, to make from them real homes of truth, to make it residences for free journalists from the whole world. Let us name these names, for example, by the name of Victoria Roshina, Ukrainian journalist who was killed and tortured in Russian prison. We need to do it now. And just watch at these villas. Do we really want to live in the world where for lies you are paid millions and for truth you are paid by death or by tortures in prison? And while Ukrainian journalists are tortured in Russian prisons, Russian propagandists like Ksenia Sobchak are drinking wine in Paris restaurants and filming some propaganda again. We should stop it as soon as possible. Let the journalists be free. Please support them. Slava Ukraini!
Thank you. On behalf of ALDE, it's Valentina Grippo.
Grazie, Chair. Colleghi, intanto dobbiamo ringraziare Eugenia Krashev e i giornalisti ucraini qui oggi a Strasburgo per il loro lavoro. Abbiamo lanciato un anno fa questa call per resolution per loro, per trasformare la solidarietà generica in azioni verificabili. Prima di tutto la risoluzione chiede maggiore protezione, accesso immediato degli organismi internazionali ai luoghi di detenzione e notifica a familiari e legali del luogo di custodia e delle condizioni sanitarie, fondi per assistenza alle famiglie e alle redazioni, corridoi sanitari per la riabilitazione post-liberazione, uso sistematico dello strumento fondamentale che è la piattaforma del Consiglio d'Europa per segnalare, verificare e seguire ogni caso fino alla chiusura. In questo il bene di questa risoluzione è che è molto concreta. Un elenco di azioni, mettere i giornalisti al centro dei negoziati, non ai margini, priorità negli scambi di prigionieri, con tracciamento pubblico dei nominativi e dello stato di ciascun caso. Sanzioni mirate, chi agisce contro questi principi ne deve rispondere. Sequestri di beni contro direttori di carceri, inquirenti e giudici responsabili di torture e processi farsa. Proteggere, liberare, rendere conto. La risoluzione spiega con esattezza come fare tutte queste azioni. Si può fare, ma bisogna, in nome di vittoria, per tutti i giornalisti detenuti, per tutti quelli che hanno perso la vita, per quelli che sono qui oggi a testimoniare con noi, dobbiamo fortemente sostenere questa risoluzione e poi dargli immediata attuazione in tutti i nostri Stati. Grazie.
Grazie Valentina. Petra Bayer is next.
Thank you very much. Today I do not want to speak about numbers, I want to speak about a person, Irina Danilovic. Irina is a daughter of Crimea, a trained medical professional, a trade union leader and a journalist. Her only crime was to speak the truth. For this, she was kidnapped by the FSB, locked in a basement for 10 days, tortured and threatened with death. Today, she is serving nearly 7 years in a Russian prison on absurd charges of possessing explosives. In reality, her health is collapsing. She is gone deaf, one ear, suffers unbearable pain, and it's very likely that she suffered from a stroke. This is not justice. This is cruelty, and this is used as a weapon of war. And Irina is not alone. There are dozens of Ukrainian journalists and hundreds of political prisoners who share her fate in Russian captivity. Their names must not be forgotten. Their voices must not be silenced. This is why I urge you, beside the campaign Journalists Matter, also to join the political prisoners mentorship launched by the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm sure Yevgenia can tell you much more if you are interested. It's quite simple but powerful. Each of us can take responsibility of one prisoner, be it a journalist or not, to speak in their name, to advocate for them, to remind them, and also to remind the world that they are not abandoned. Colleagues, silence helps the oppressors. Solidarity helps the oppressed. Let us stand with Irina and with all Ukrainian political prisoners, including journalists, in Russian captivity until they are free. And thank you very much for this very good report, Yevgenia. Thank you.
Thank you, Petra. Zanda Kalina Lukasiewicz. Zanda.
President, and first let me thank Yevgenia you for this detailed report. Dear colleagues, while the Ukrainians bravely fight Russian forces and pay the highest price on the battlefield, it is our obligation to confront Russia's crimes in the international arena. Russia's war has produced too many violations to ignore: abducted children, destroyed lives and cities, and journalists killed or held in captivity. We must not forget any of these crimes. But the price Russia currently pays through sanctions and isolation remains insufficient to change its behavior. We must maximize the cost to Russia. And we know what would hurt Russia most. First, transfer Russia's frozen assets to Ukraine so Ukraine can strengthen its armed forces to recover and defend its sovereign territory. Second, Europeans must finally stop buying Russian oil and gas and LNG. It's blood money used to finance Russia's crimes. And third, we must be louder outside our own bubble and put Russia's war at the center of our discussions with partners around the world. Indeed, we must hold every individual, Russian officials, soldiers, and civilians who enable crimes accountable for what they commit. Dear colleagues, journalists play a vital role in society by uncovering truth, holding power accountable, and providing people with accurate information to make informed decisions. In many cases, they risk their lives. When Latvia fought to regain its independence in 1991, journalists played a vital role to show truth, brutality, and real face of the Soviet regime. Cameramen Zweigner and Slapinch paid the highest price. But the truth Soviets couldn't kill, and they won't succeed this time neither. There is no middle ground. In this moment of history, we must stand firm until justice prevails
Thank you,
and
Zanda.
Ukraine achieves victory. Thank you.
Markus Wissel is next. Markus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear friends and colleagues, we gather here today not just as parliamentarians, but also guardians of the truth in a world darkened by the Russian aggression. This draft resolution lays the brutal reality. Russia's war against Ukraine is also a savage assault on truth, but also on journalism itself. Since February 2020, we've seen over 800 crimes against media professionals, 108 killed, many deliberately targeted despite their press vests. TV towers have been shattered, editorial offices in ruins, and at least 26 journalists unlawfully detained, some for nearly a decade since the Crimea's occupation. This is no accident. It's a war on truth, where free voices are branded enemies to hide atrocities. We mourn all those tortured and killed in custody, a stark symbol of Russia's contempt for international law. Yet recent releases remind us that pressure works. Russia must seize these violations right now, release all detained journalists, many of them named in this report, provide their locations, and grant access to the ICRC and UN monitors. We as members of this assembly must amplify this through sanctions, target commanders, intelligence chiefs, prison heads with travel bans, asset freezes, and more. We must support Ukraine's register of damage, a special tribunal, and reparations for shattered lives and infrastructure. Let us prosecute those inciting hate and war crimes, bolster Ukrainian media with funds and awareness. And today, I urge adoption of this resolution. The time for nice words are over. Action alone will free the truth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Gusti Gras. Gusti, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Chers collègues, cette partie de session place à juste titre les journalistes au cœur de nos préoccupations. Qu'il s'agisse des journalistes ukrainiens détenus par la Russie, des reporters à Gaza ou du fait symbolique que les 3 candidats au prix Václav Havel soient tous journalistes. Car le droit à une information libre n'est pas un luxe démocratique, c'est le socle même sur lequel repose toute démocratie digne de ce nom. Aujourd'hui, nulle part en Europe, la destruction de ce droit n'est plus systématique que dans les territoires sous contrôle russe en Ukraine. Les chiffres sont implacables. Plus de 800 crimes contre les médias, 108 journalistes tués, 26 toujours détenus dans des conditions inhumaines. Derrière ces statistiques, il y a des visages, des vies brisées. Celui de Victoria Roshina hante notre conscience collective. Victoria savait ce qu'elle risquait, mais elle savait aussi que sans témoin, les crimes restent dans l'ombre. Paradoxe tragique, ceux privés de parole connaissent le mieux le prix de la liberté d'expression. Les 26 journalistes dans le geôle russe comprennent ce que nous, parlons librement ici, risquons d'oublier. Chers collègues, face à cette barbarie, notre indignation ne suffit plus. Les attaques délibérées contre les journalistes sont des crimes de guerre. Mais n'attendons pas les verdicts de demain. Aujourd'hui, nous disposons d'une arme puissante, la pression internationale. Cette pression qui peut encore sauver les 26 journalistes qui croupissent dans les geôles russes. Chaque résolution adoptée, chaque sanction imposée, chaque voix qui s'élève dans cette enceinte est un massage à ceux qui croient pouvoir museler la vérité. Nous ne céderons pas. Victoire à la vérité, victoire à la liberté, victoire pour Victoria. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Gusti. Lord Foulkes is next. Dear George, you have the floor.
Mr. President, as Sir Edward Lee said earlier, this is one of the most important debates of our whole week. And Yevgenia has produced an excellent report and an excellent introduction outlining the problems that we face. But condemning those is not enough. What we need to ensure also is a transparent register of all detained journalists, full access by independent monitors, and accountability for all those responsible, as Valentina so rightly said earlier. But we must also be aware that these abuses are only part of a much wider campaign of aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine, against democracy, the very foundation of this Council of Europe. And that's why, as Zander said earlier, we must go beyond words of sympathy. We must give stronger support for Ukraine, financially, humanitarian-wise, and in military terms as well. And that's why we need tougher sanctions. In the United Kingdom, Russian assets have been frozen, but we're only at the moment passing to Ukraine the interest on that. We must pass all of those assets to Ukraine to help build up Ukraine in the future. The struggle for Ukrainian journalists for truth, the struggle for the Ukrainian people for our freedom is our struggle too in the whole of Europe. If we believe in democracy, if we believe in justice, then we must act with courage, not only to liberate those journalists held in Russian prisons, but to ensure that Ukraine prevails in this war and this invasion by Russia. Slava Ukrainia!
Thank you, George. Emanuelis Zingeris. Emanuelis, you have the floor.
Dear friends, we are just facing expansion, not only of Russia, but expansion of Soviet Russia Stalinist rule to all Europe with their hybrid operations, and expansion the territory of Russia during their violent war against sovereign, independent, and democratic Ukraine. I was asking my friends in India, how do you think we should have united democratic world in favor to defend democracies against invasion of totalitarian state and expanding their habits to make people captive? So the issue of journalists presented fantastically in our committee yesterday shows not only courage, but Russia special endeavors and their action to silence the news from the front line, to silence the news from Bucha, to silence the news of cleaning and actually ethnic cleaning of Ukrainians and resettling colonists in the occupied region and change the ethnic elements to bring Russian colonies. So in this case, yesterday was presented the terrible picture of what they're doing with people from free mass media, and especially Ukrainians. And we discover, Mr. President, new fact, that Red Cross is doing nothing. The Red Cross is become absolutely silenced during all our requests. Coming here, I saw 6 resolutions done during last years with the points from our assembly, with our friends from this chamber, to ask Red Cross to be involved. Where are they? We should make a motion of resolution and make inquiry of Red Cross activities, not visiting captive people in Russia captivity. Our focus should be on the Red Cross, where they're refusing to go, even to Belarus, even to Russia Federation, and now to see the captive journalists and captive inmates from taken from Ukraine. From this case, we should be united, asking all international organizations be active in liberating our friends.
I will be accused by those who will not have the time to speak. Thank you. I take note of what you have said on Red Cross. Didier Marie is next.
Mes chers collègues, si nous sommes informés depuis 4 ans de ce qui se passe sur le front comme dans les territoires occupés depuis l'agression de la Fédération de Russie contre l'Ukraine, c'est grâce aux journalistes qui, avec courage et détermination, continuent de travailler au péril de leur vie. Ça a été rappelé à plusieurs reprises, depuis le début de la guerre en février 2022, ce sont pas moins de 111 professionnels des médias qui ont perdu la vie, dont 12 alors qu'ils étaient en reportage. 26 autres sont aujourd'hui illégalement détenus dans les prisons russes. Je voudrais à cet instant rappeler que la Fédération de Russie reste liée par la Convention de Genève et ses protocoles additionnels qui accordent une protection particulière aux correspondants de guerre et aux journalistes couvrant les conflits. En outre, la Cour européenne des droits de l'homme, compétente en Ukraine, a estimé dans son arrêt du 25 juin 2024 que la Russie était responsable de nombreuses violations des droits de l'homme dans les territoires ukrainiens qu'elle occupe aujourd'hui, visant notamment les journalistes. Il est clair que la Russie fait peu de cas du droit international. Il est donc nécessaire que nos États respectifs renforcent la pression sur les autorités russes afin d'obtenir la libération des journalistes détenus en violation du droit international. Cela passe nécessairement par de nouvelles sanctions, visant notamment les personnes directement impliquées dans les crimes commis contre ces journalistes, mais également contre leurs familles. Les journalistes doivent être protégés pour que le monde soit informé, ce que la Russie ne veut surtout pas, de craindre que ces exactions en soient connues de tous. La Russie préfère la désinformation à une information libre. Nous devons le dénoncer. En parallèle, nous devons continuer de soutenir les activités du registre des dommages pour l'Ukraine, l'établissement de la commission d'indemnisation pour l'Ukraine, ainsi que la mise en place et le fonctionnement du tribunal spécial pour le crime d'agression. Il est nécessaire que les crimes commis par la Russie ne restent pas impunis et nous voterons pour ce projet de résolution.
Thank you. Sir Edward Lee is next.
Mr. President, this body is only powerful and only has real point when we're completely united. And I think in that sense, this debate now is a high point of our week. Yesterday evening, we had a debate on Hungary. We were divided. I'm not sure what that will achieve. But today, I'm a Conservative. I've agreed with every single word of every single speech that has been made so far. I agreed with the very moving and powerful speech made by Mr. Conor Murphy right at the beginning of this debate. In very powerful language, he spoke up on behalf of journalists, non-combatants, not soldiers, whose only job is to tell the truth. I agree with every word that Baroness Chakrabarti made on behalf of the Socialist Group. Lord Fuchs and myself are old sparring partners, but he also spoke movingly on behalf of freedom. But you know what moved me most was when I went downstairs and I saw those video clips of Victoria Roshnaya. We may be old and cynical, perhaps been around too long, well certainly maybe I have been, but when you look at that young woman, so full of hope, so young, so brave, forever 27, her life so cruelly cut short, tortured, bits of her body removed. Why? This is sheer cruelty. This is horror. So I think when we have these debates, we are speaking for the whole of Europe, and we are saying to all the people in Europe, long live freedom, long live truth, long live Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Edward. Lord Don Twigg is next. Don.
Mr. President, Ms. Kravchuk's report is one of the best and most powerfully argued cases I've seen. I spent 27 years of my life as a journalist working on a newspaper called The Free Press. And when I read this report, paragraph 89 on page 18 jumps off the paper. Speaking of the Ukraine conflict, she writes, "This war is also a war against truth, and as such, free media and journalists are treated as enemies. I was trained to report true facts, untainted by personal opinion or pressure from interested parties. My editor, a brilliant teacher of journalists, always said, never allow yourself to be influenced by interested parties. Facts and truth are what matters." Across our continent, journalists are under pressure and their rights under threat. That is why we here in this Council of Europe must be their defenders and guardians, as Edward has just said. Amnesty International say that last year was the deadliest ever for journalists. 124 journalists were killed, the highest number ever. Journalists are often the first to be targeted because they are often the first to warn when freedom is under threat. Throughout history, tyrants have known that if they can silence journalists, then the way is clear to clear the way for against protesters. Without independent journalists, there could be no truth, no press freedom, no freedom at all. An American, Richard Feynman, once said, "I would rather have questions that cannot be answered than answers that cannot be questioned." Journalists ask the questions the tyrants do not want asked and certainly do not want to answer. And we see in this report the Russians targeting the Ukrainian media. April the 6th, a Russian ballistic missile caused severe damage and destruction to offices of Ukraine's foreign broadcasting services. The Russians claimed they destroyed a military facility. More attacks followed. The safety of Ukraine's journalists is of increasing concern to us all. Colleagues, these journalists and thousands of others across Europe ensure that press freedom is upheld. To do that, they must be able to work without fear of persecution. We should never forget that journalists help ensure the powerful are held to account. Peoples everywhere should stand with them. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you, Don. Regina Bastos is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, colleagues. The persecution of Ukrainian journalists by the Russian Federation is not an excess of war. It is a deliberate strategy. By silencing the press, Putin's regime seeks to erase evidence of crimes and to impose lies as the official narrative. This is not new. We saw the same in Chechnya, in Syria, and in the Balkans, where censorship and intimidation were used to conceal atrocities. Today, in Ukraine, 26 journalists are missing or held in captivity. They are submitted to torture and to sham trials. Turning journalists into targets means turning information itself into the enemy. Our response cannot be timid. Just as the International Crime Tribunal judge crimes committed in the Balkans and Rwanda, we must ensure that every perpetrator, from prison guards to the leadership of the Kremlin, faces international justice. Freedom of the press is not a luxury. It is the red line that separates civilization from barbarism. If we accept that Russia may continue to detain and kill journalists, truth itself will become the first victim. That's why we must state clearly here in this assembly, Ukrainian journalists are not alone. In Russian censorship will never triumph over European democracy. Thanks, rapporteurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Larissa Bilozer is next.
Dear President, dear colleagues, I thank Evgenia Kravchuk for such an important report. As a journalist herself, Evgenia works in international institutions in protecting journalists is very vital. It is clear to us that Russia's war against Ukraine is also war against truth. That's why journalists are deliberately targeted. We must speak here about Ukrainian prisoners of war who are tortured and denied access in the Russian jails, but also about silent crisis. At least 16,000 civilians are officially reported missing or in captivity. Russia systematically violates international humanitarian law. Captives are denied lawyers, family contact, and humanitarian visits. They vanish into sham trials, branded as extremists and terrorists. Journalists face particularly brutally abduction, torture, denial of medical care, even execution. Returned body of journalist Victoria Roshchina showed wounds, broken ribs, electrocution marks. She weighed less than 30 kilograms. When body was returned, her eyes were cut out brain removed, and throat larynx teared out. This horrific set appears as a message from Russians to all world. Do not see the crime, do not think about them, and do not speak of them. PACE has launched the annual initiative Victory for Victoria to honor her and other killed journalists. I thank our president, Mr. Rousopoulos, for support in such an initiative. Alongside our efforts to bring Ukrainian soldiers home, we must fight for journalists and civilians too. They are invisible victims of this war. We must not allow them to be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. Matthias Johnson is next.
Thank you, Mr. President. And first of all, thanks for this important report. A country as Sweden will always stand up for freedom of speech, press freedom and safety of civilians during war, of course. What is happening in Ukraine is not just an attack on the country, it's also an attack on free speech and on the truth. Since Russia's full invasion, there have been more than 800 cases of media rights being violated. Journalists have been killed, put in prison, been tortured. And this is not by an accident. It's just because they are journalists. One terrible example is Victoria Russian, a Ukrainian journalist who was tortured and killed while she was held by Russian forces. We can't forget her. Under international law, journalists in war zones are civilian. Attacking them is a war crime and also a way to try to silence the truth. I strongly support the call of free all journalists who are in prison. I also support strong action to make sure that people responsible are brought to justice through the International Criminal Court and International Court. I believe that sanctions should be even stronger against Russian people who commit to help with these crimes. At the same time, Ukraine must try to continue to help to protect all the journalists, support free media, of course. Attacking journalists is attacking on democracy itself. As a member we are at the Council of Europe, we have a duty to act, not just talk. Therefore, it's important to support this report for the journalists and for the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Dear colleagues, I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. Speeches must not exceed 400 words. I remind colleagues that the typewritten text can be submitted electronically if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. That concludes the list of speakers. Before I give the floor to Evgenia as a rapporteur, I would like to personally thank Evgenia for her report and for accepting my proposal some months ago to introduce the day that we call Victory for Victoria Day. As a former journalist, I had been working as a journalist from 1981 till 2000, so it's been 25 years that I'm not a journalist anymore. But I never forget that journalism, like politics, is a mission and not a profession. And I'm really glad, and I want to thank on behalf of the jury, our former president, Tini Cox, who is present here today, that on the 25th of August, when I proposed to the jury of the Václav Havel Award that we need to do something about journalism in this session, they accepted unanimously. And imagine how touched I am that this session is dedicated to the people who are related to the human rights. When a member of a jury told me, how can we relate the Václav Havel Award with the human rights, I said, because human rights can thrive only under light, and journalism brings light. Darkness is the worst for human rights, the worst situation. So thank you all the political groups, for supporting this very important initiative of Evgenia's. Evgenia, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Dear colleagues, dear President, first of all, thank you for this idea. And indeed, hopefully when we vote for this resolution, we will put into action, and every autumn part session, we will commemorate the memory of those who put their life at risk to report, to bring the truth. And this commemoration day will be called Victory for Victoria in the memory of Victoria Roshina. And at 1 p.m. we will be opening an exhibition dedicated to those Ukrainian journalists who are still in captivity, but also we will welcome those who were able, who we brought back, and they are with us in Strasbourg. I would like to thank each and everyone for these words. A lot of Ukrainian journalists are actually following this debate, so they will know that we have total unity on this issue and on the issue of the detained, not just journalists, but civilian detainees and prisoners of war. So that is very valuable for us. And indeed, there is a mentorship program and a course that you could follow, and you can just pick up the name or two and speak about those detainees, journalists or other civilian detainees, and spread the word, and so their names would not be forgotten, and we would put much pressure on Russian Federation to be able to bring everyone home. Thank you again, and hopefully we'll support the resolution with big numbers or unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Evgenia, and I have to ask now if the chairperson of the committee wishes to speak for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I think that the report and the presentation provided by Ms. Kravchuk speak for themselves. In that regard, I have little to add. I would like rather to make mine the words of Ukrainian journalist and human rights defender Maxim Butkevich, winner of this year's Václav Havel's Prize. The words that were pronounced here in this hemicycle on Monday, that is less than 1 year after his release from Russian captivity. He said the following: "Please do not forget Ukrainian prisoners of war. Do not forget Ukrainian civilians illegally detained by Russia, Ukrainian children illegally kidnapped by Russia. Do not forget all those who fight for freedom and dignity and are repressed and deprived of liberty in Europe and elsewhere. Please remember them, fight for their release, and help us defend the most fundamental things without which we cannot imagine our Europe, our future, nor our very humanity. Please, let's not forget them. In that sense, I hope you will support Ms. Kravchuk's report. Thank you."
Thank you, dear Mehmet. The Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights has presented the draft resolution, document 16237, to which 2 amendments have been tabled. They will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. I understand that the chairperson of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 1 and 2 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the committee, be declared as definitely approved. Is that so? Yes, thank you. If no objects, I will consider the amendments to be approved. Is there an objection? No, so the amendments are approved.
Page 14.
We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 16237 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft resolution in document 16237 as amended is unanimously, I think, adopted. Dear colleagues, once again, congratulations to all of you, to the rapporteurs and those who had the opportunity to participate, and the rest, as I said, I would like to ask for you to deposit your speeches to the relevant office. I would like to ask you to remain seated because in the next few minutes we will hear the address of Her Excellency, the President of Malta, who will enter the room soon.
Son Excellence, Madame Myriam Spiteri Debono, présidente de la République de Malte.
Welcome, Madam President. Dear colleagues, we will now hear an address by Her Excellency, Madam Myriam Spiteri Debono, President of Malta, and after this address, Madam President will take questions from the floor. It is my honor to welcome among us Her Excellency. Madam President, thank you for joining us today and for agreeing to this exchange of views. You are originally from the island of Gozo, that mythical place where, according to Homer, the nymph Calypso is said to have kept Ulysses for 7 years. Fortunately, Zeus intervened and he was released, much to the joy of Penelope. One might say that this was already an early lesson in gender relations. From myth to reality, your own life's journey has been marked by a deep engagement with questions of equality. For many years, you chaired the women's branch of your political party, and you were active in the Gender Equality Commission from its earliest days. In 1996, you broke new ground by becoming the first woman to serve as Speaker of Malta's House of Representatives. And in 2024, you were unanimously elected as the 11th President of the Republic of Malta. At the Parliamentary Assembly, we also strive to advance equality and to empower women. Our biggest prize for women empowerment has often shone a spotlight on courageous women who inspire us all. In this spirit, Madam President, we salute you as a role model. I would once again like to thank you for taking the time to engage in this dialogue with us. And without further ado, Madam President, the floor is yours.
President of the Parliamentary Assembly, Secretary General of the Council of Europe, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly, Excellencies, other esteemed visitors. I stand before you in my capacity as the head of state of Malta, but I also speak to you as a woman and a European citizen. My views and perspectives have been shaped over the decades I have lived through, events I have witnessed and analyzed, the ebbs and flows of transformation, disruption, progress, at times regress, both in my own country and across our continent. This occasion holds particular meaning for me, as it coincides with my country's 60th anniversary as a committed member of this organization. For Malta, the Council of Europe is a forum where our core values are nurtured, upheld, and translated into tangible progress. Our membership of the Council has deepened our engagement, shaping not only our national reforms, but also our wider international outlook. To speak here today is therefore a moment of solemn reflection, a reflection on where we stand as democracies, as societies, and as custodians of the promise made by Europe 75 years ago, when the European Convention on Human Rights was adopted to safeguard freedom, justice, and democracy on our continent. This is also a moment for renewed resolve. History teaches us that rights achieved are not rights automatically guaranteed. We have got to be ever vigilant that democratic values are never eroded. Throughout my life, I have witnessed progress. Legal systems have grown more inclusive, institutions more effective. Voices that were long silenced are finally being heard, acknowledged, and empowered to claim their rightful place in our societies. Our continent has been at the forefront of these transformations, setting standards in human rights, in dignity, and equality. Yet, we must also confront a troubling paradox. While our legal frameworks have never been more comprehensive, the values that underpin them, equality, solidarity, justice, have never felt more fragile. Across Europe, discrimination is re-emerging, both in blatant forms and in more subtle ways. Digital technologies, once seen as tools for liberation and democratic participation, are now too often used to deepen division, spread misinformation and disinformation, online and offline, targeting women, immigrants, minorities, LGBTIQ persons, and other vulnerable groups. It is regrettable, and it starts to be very worrying when such actions are met with silence and are allowed to subsist unexposed and unopposed. Gender-based violence is not only persisting, but it is also evolving in both private and public spheres. Women and gender-diverse persons are facing a resurgence of harm that is increasingly visible. Yet disturbingly, it is achieving normalization. Misogynistic narratives, once pushed to the margins, are now echoed in mainstream discourse, Online spaces, once hailed as tools for empowerment, have become arenas of harassment and targeted abuse. Too often, women who dare to lead or speak out pay the price with their safety, their dignity, even with their lives. This is a stark reminder that progress is not permanent. Hard-won gains must be defended, renewed, and advanced with every generation, constantly strengthened to withstand evolving currents. Distinguished members, it is true that the journey towards women's empowerment and leadership has made significant strides. Many long-standing barriers have been challenged, and societal attitudes have changed, often more rapidly than the institutions designed to reflect and support them. Yet, despite these achievements, there is still a long way to go before we can declare that equality has been accomplished. In Europe and across the globe, women continue to be underrepresented in the highest levels of political and institutional leadership. Malta has played a meaningful role in this journey. Less than a decade after becoming a republic, a woman was appointed as the head of state of our country. In doing so, we took a step towards shattering the perception that the highest echelons of power were only for men. However, while such breakthroughs may send a powerful message and serve as a statement of intent, they must be part of a broader effort and not an isolated measure. When progress slows, we have to push it forward. Change does not happen by chance. It happens when people demand it with conviction and courage and push it forward with perseverance and persuasion. In that spirit, Malta has in recent years introduced gender quotas in its national parliament. This was a tangible and necessary step towards visibly redressing imbalances in political structures. It was a decision made in recognition of the fact that representation should never be just symbolic. It must be meaningful, a critical mass, adequate presence and participation by the female gender is essential to the legitimacy, the diversity, and the effectiveness of democratic institutions. I believe we have come to a juncture where we have to stop and analyze whether the present surge of violence targeted at women from all angles, not least on the domestic front, is itself a backlash, the result of the progress we have achieved so far. If this is so, it means that we have not done enough to change the innate attitudes of masculine superiority in parallel with legal and social developments to achieve equality. It would indeed be tragic if the progress achieved so far is lost through misguided extolling of traditional family structures, harkening back to patriarchal stereotypes. Democracy must be lived and sustained through justice, through equality, through civic engagement, through education, and also through upbringing. It must be shielded from manipulation and from the perversion of truth by those who seek to weaponize falsehoods for power. In a world increasingly shaped by the digital sphere, truth and trust have to be resilient. Misinformation and disinformation erode public trust, fuel division, and undermine the very foundations of free and open societies. They target not only institutions, but the human dignity and civic involvement that democratic systems are built upon. The freedoms democracy is supposed to guarantee are themselves vitiated. Freedom of speech, of expression, and of the press end up perverting freedom of thought and freedom of choice. This is why Malta stands in full alignment with Secretary General Alain Berset's initiative for a new democratic pact for Europe, which seeks to redefine and strengthen democracy. We see this initiative as a moral imperative, renewing our social contract, fostering the kind of public discourse that democracy deserves and demands. As a country, we believe that democracy must be experienced in every community, embraced by every generation, and reflected in every citizen's life. Democracy's principles of inclusion, acceptance of others, participation, and sharing, the trickling of common good down to each and every individual citizen, must be molded into the psyche of the younger generations if these values are to be felt on the ground and work their way upwards through the hierarchies of power, manifesting themselves in future leaders who wield the power. This belief is reflected in Malta's own national policies. We were among the first European countries to introduce the right to vote at 16, a clear affirmation of the principle that political maturity is shaped through active engagement, that civic responsibility is nurtured through participation, and that age alone should never define a citizen's ability to contribute meaningfully to public life. Democracy's strength is measured not by how well it serves the powerful, but how it includes the young, the marginalized, the unheard. It is therefore our responsibility to ensure that democracy does not become an abstract ideal, but is a daily practice, fueled by participation, by trust, and grounded in truth. Of vital importance is how we teach and understand our own histories. A healthy democracy must be courageous enough to confront its past, learn from its failures as much as celebrate its triumphs. By doing so, we equipped ourselves, and especially the upcoming generation, to face challenges with the wisdom and resilience needed to come up with solutions to new and complex problems. Democracy imposes a collective duty to protect the most vulnerable sections of the population, particularly children. Children cannot navigate the digitalized world on their own. Excuse me. While offering great opportunities, the digital environment also exposes children to cyberbullying, exploitation, manipulation, and abuse. As we consider the world that young people are inheriting from us, we cannot ignore one of the most urgent, global, and defining challenges of our time: climate change. Climate change, together with biodiversity loss and pollution, tests our environmental stewardship and imposes upon us grave responsibilities, demanding immediate action. Distinguished members, we must not lose sight also of the current international geopolitical situation. At the Reykjavik summit 2.5 years ago, we declared our support for Ukraine and made a solemn commitment. Today, that commitment remains constant. Ukraine's pursuit of justice, accountability, and sovereignty in the face of an unrelenting war of aggression continues to stand at the top of the Council of Europe's agenda, as well as the priorities of Malta's presidency. Through concrete achievements, including the Register of Damages, the Action Plan for Ukraine's Resilience, Recovery and Reconstruction, and the Consultation Group on the Children of Ukraine, we have praised the rights and dignity of the Ukrainian people at the core of our collective actions. Work on the Future Claims Commission is a vital step towards redress, accountability, and reparation. We were honored to spearhead the historic milestone achieved last June, whereby the Committee of Ministers paved the way for the signing of the bilateral agreement on the establishment of the Special Tribunal for the crime of aggression by President Volodymyr Zelensky and Secretary General Alain Berset. The tribunal will ensure that those who have violated the UN Charter are held responsible through legitimate legal mechanisms. In keeping with these principles in its sections both within Europe and beyond, Malta last week, during the United Nations General Assembly, formally recognized the State of Palestine. The humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is catastrophic. On the 7th of October 2023, Hamas carried out brutal attacks, which reignited the embers of war in the Middle East. Hostages must be released immediately. However, the scale of retaliation by Israel has far exceeded the established principles of necessity, distinction, and proportionality. Humanitarian aid must reach its destinations. It must reach those in dire need of it. The Gaza population faces hunger, dehydration, trauma, and lacks medical care. Starvation is no longer a looming threat. It is a daily reality for countless families struggling to survive amidst ongoing hostilities, and always the most vulnerable are children. In this context, Malta's recognition of the State of Palestine was not simply a political act. It was a principled reaffirmation of our unwavering commitment to human rights, justice, and the belief that all peoples deserve to live in dignity, peace, and security, free from fear and deprivation. It is our hope that the formal recognition of Palestinian statehood in recent days can contribute in some way to a lasting peace. Distinguished members, guided by its enduring commitment to equality and human dignity, Malta's presidency has placed the fight against all forms of violence, discrimination, and hatred at the core of its agenda. The conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, and also those elsewhere around the globe, have laid bare the deep injustices, the entrenched inequalities, and the grave consequences of failing to uphold our shared humanity. At a time when hate speech, polarization, and intolerance are gaining ground across our societies and seeping into public discourse, we must confront this corrosive tide with unwavering resolve. Defending democracy against hate speech and the distortion of truth is to defend the dignity of us all. If we are to remain true to the values that define the Council of Europe, the rule of law, human rights, democracy, then we must stand firmly and collectively for these rights, for the protection of our shared humanity, for the preservation of social cohesion and the democratic fabric of our communities. As we marked the 75th anniversary of the European Convention on Human Rights. Let us keep vibrant and alive the extraordinary vision that rose from the ruins of war. A Council of Europe rooted in justice, guided by human dignity, united in its commitment to the enduring power of the values enshrined in the Convention. The relevance of any organization, including the Council of Europe, depends on its ability to reflect, to respond, to renew itself, especially in times of profound challenges. Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam President. May I invite you to take the seat reserved for head of states, and you can answer the questions that you have agreed from your seat. We will first hear questions from the speakers on behalf of the political groups, and then we'll hear the response from the President of the Republic of Malta to those questions. I remind my colleagues that the questions must be limited to 30 seconds and no more, and colleagues should be asking questions and not making speeches. I will start with the list of, as I said, with the speakers on behalf of political groups, and first, on behalf of the Socialists, Greens and Democrats, is Phyllis Pollard.
Ich werde auf Deutsch sprechen. Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender. Die Republik Malta war bis 2023...
Can you wait for a minute, dear Phyllis? Wait for a minute before you start your question.
Ja? Die Republik Malta war bis 2023 das einzige EU-Land mit einem vollständigen gesetzlichen Abtreibungsverbot. Trotz der Reform 2023 bleibt es das restriktivste Land in der EU in diesem Bereich. Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin, letzten Samstag folgten viele Menschen anlässlich des internationalen Safe Abortion Day in Valletta dem Aufruf von Voice for Choice Malta unter dem Motto, ich zitiere, Frauen verdienen Gesundheitsversorgung, nicht einen Gerichtstermin, um gegen das nahezu vollständige Abtreibungsverbot und das jüngste Urteil zu demonstrieren, in dem eine 28-jährige Frau wegen einer Abtreibung zu einer Freiheitsstrafe verurteilt wurde. Im Namen meiner Fraktion frage ich Sie daher, wie rechtfertigen Sie die fortgesetzte Strafverfolgung von Frauen, die sich für eine sichere Abtreibung entscheiden, vor dem Hintergrund der Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention, und planen Sie konkrete Gesetzesinitiativen, um die reproduktive Selbstbestimmung der Frau sicherzustellen?
Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you. Madam President, would you like to respond?
Abortion is a very deeply debated topic in Malta. And the people have still been discussing this for a very long time, and discussion is still ongoing. The political parties do not have it on their agenda. There is no party with a commitment to introduce abortion. Of course, we are aware that there are still certain laws which could end up in situations like this one you mentioned of this woman. But the law is what it is, unless it is changed. We are focusing, however, on moving forward in respect of values and ensuring that everyone has access to high-quality sexual and reproductive health services. Malta offers a comprehensive range of sexual and reproductive health and rights, including sexual and reproductive health education, antenatal, natal and postnatal care, prevention, diagnosis and treatment of sexually transmitted infections and other infections and cancers, as well as working and helping couples who face infertility problems. Malta provides information, support and counseling for victims of sexual and other forms of violence. And the morning after pill has been legally available in Malta since 2016. And there have also been several initiatives taken in relation to combating violence against women. These include amendments to the criminal code. Feminicide is now a crime on its own, a special kind of crime. Also, virginity testing is a criminal offense. Apart from that, we have intensified our efforts across all sectors, particularly in schools. And professionals have been trained to deal with cases of gender-based violence. The Malta police force has opened numerous hubs to deal with such cases. We offer protection, but the question of abortion is still debatable. And of course, with something like that, the population itself has got to be prepared for it. The climate in Malta, the political climate, our backgrounds entail that with abortion, we treat it with caution, and the population has got to be ready.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the European People's Party, it is Andrea Eder-Gitzthaler. Andrea. Andrea, we cannot hear you. Can you press the button? Once?
Yeah, it works.
Good.
Madam President, so today is the day of the older people. I ask you a question about the younger people. Because youth empowerment is high on the agenda of the Maltese presidency. In the face of increasing trends of democratic backslide, Malta wants to foster a more active, meaningful and engaging role for young people in democratic life. During Malta's presidency, the achievements of 15 years Lanzarote Convention were highlighted in a ministerial conferences hosted in La Valletta. Are we all doing enough to live up to our moral and legal obligations to take meaningful action for our children, particularly in light of emerging risks linked to digital environments and artificial intelligence? And what further measures does Malta plan to take, empower and to protect children during its presidency? Thank you very much.
Madam President, would you like to respond?
Our societies face unprecedented geopolitical and social challenges, and so youth empowerment is nowadays more important than ever. We must do our utmost to secure the active participation of the younger generation in democratic life. The solutions, not only for tomorrow, but also for today, rest in the hands of young people. Malta's efforts, both leading up to and during its presidency of the Council of Europe, have been guided by one conviction, namely that empowering young people is not only an investment in their future, but it is an investment in Europe as a whole. Nationally, following the forward-looking decision to lower the voting age to 16 in 2014, this government has continued to take progressive steps. In December 2023, we introduced the necessary amendments to enable 16-year-old elected representatives to serve as mayors and deputy mayors. Malta became the first European country to take this step, and we are proud that this reform was unanimously adopted by all members of Parliament. I strongly urge other parliaments to consider embracing the experience this possibility affords as well. In May, we held our first presidency event dedicated entirely to youth, in cooperation with the Parliamentary Assembly at the margins of the PACE Standing Committee in Malta. It provided a key platform for Maltese youth to engage directly with parliamentarians for all over Europe, fostering dialogue on pressing issues. A week later, we brought together over 500 participants from 42 countries at the 4th European Youth Work Convention. This three-day event focused on addressing the needs and aspirations of young people while promoting their inclusiveness, active participation, and empowerment. We also supported initiatives by the National Youth Council and our youth delegate to the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities, recognizing that giving young people a stronger role in democracy is not just an opportunity afforded them, but it is our responsibility. In Strasbourg, we are also promoting youth perspectives in the organization's work, including by participating at the Octopus Conference, the Youth Peace Group, and through the efforts of the North-South Center that retains youth engagements at its heart. The culmination of these efforts will be the 10th Conference of Ministers responsible for youth, which will convene in Malta next month after a 13-year absence. Its aim is to take stock of the progress made since the last conference in the light of the Reykjavik Declaration and to agree on the main directions for European youth policy in the coming years. To this end, it will bring young people and policymakers together around the same table to foster dialogue and decisions that will lead to results. This is a model which is dear to our heart and we are proud to be promoting within the Council of Europe, ensuring that young people are part of both the process and its outcomes. We are proud to be recognized as a driver in European youth policy and are determined to continue along this path, working hand in hand with young people to build a more peaceful, more fair and more inclusive Europe.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the European Conservative Parties and Affiliates, Bob de Brabander.
Madam President, Malta is one of the EU's smallest member states, yet because of its location in the central Mediterranean, it has faced significant pressure from illegal migration. With limited territory and resources, how is your government addressing the impact this has on Malta's security, social cohesion, and long-term stability?
Thank you. Madam President, would you like to respond?
Migration is a challenge, and no nation can confront it on its own. It calls for stronger cooperation within Europe and with our partners in countries of origin and transit. If we focus only on managing arrivals, we risk ignoring the deeper drivers of conflict, poverty, instability, and human rights abuses. A balanced approach that strengthens borders while tackling root causes through partnership, development, and stability will deliver solutions that are effective and sustainable. Our foremost priority must always be to protect human life and support people in building safe, peaceful, and prosperous communities. This means addressing the root causes of migration while disrupting smuggling networks that exploit the vulnerable, putting lives at risk both at sea and on land. These were precisely the principles underlying the Valletta Summit on Migration 10 years ago, and these principles remain relevant today. At the international level, Malta has been active. Just to give an example, we continue to strongly support and participate in the Migration Capacity Partnership for the Mediterranean Training Institute, established in Valletta, together with the International Center for Migration Policy Development and international partners. The Training Institute offers participating southern partner countries, Libya, Lebanon, Jordan, and Tunisia accredited training designated to professionalize migration management according to their needs. Courses cover a holistic view of migration management, including communication, legal migration, reintegration, and tackling human smuggling, economic diplomacy, and diaspora engagement. The Institute has also recently hosted a leadership course specifically for female officials from a variety of government entities, including ministries of the Interior, Customs, Foreign Affairs, and the Armed Forces, highlighting Malta's commitment to inclusive capacity building in migration governance. In conclusion, where migration is complex and challenging, Europe's Human Rights Network, the vigilance of the European Court of Human Rights, and proactive initiatives demonstrate that we can confront these challenges in principled, cooperative, and effective manner. We must always keep in full view that we have a fundamental obligation to receive and continue offering genuine asylum to those who need and qualify for it.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Alliance of Liberal Democrats for Europe, Lesia Zaburana.
Thank you. Dear Madam President, almost 4 years my country is fighting for their independence and sovereignty. Actually, today we honor the Day of the Defenders of Ukraine, both men and women. Almost 1 million people now is fighting in our army for our independence. Almost all our children in Ukraine are victims of this terrible war. So could Malta expand cooperation with Ukraine in the field of rehabilitation and medical assistance to military and civilian victims of the war? Thank you.
Thank you, Lesia. Madam President, would you like to respond?
Since the onset of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, Malta has been proactive in providing humanitarian assistance, both bilaterally and multilaterally. The support encompasses various initiatives aimed at alleviating the suffering of those affected by the conflict. Bilateral assistance. Malta has extended its support through several direct initiatives. Medical aid. Shipments of medicines and medical supplies have been dispatched to Ukraine to address urgent healthcare needs. Oncology services. Free oncology services have been offered to cancer patients fleeing Ukraine, ensuring continuity of care for those in need. Winterization support. Financial contributions have been made to fund the purchase of generators and medical equipment, aiding Ukraine's winterization plan to prepare for harsh winter conditions. Project Hope Initiative. Malta has financially supported Project Hope's efforts in Ukraine, particularly in the renovation and modernization of the Mykolaichi outpatient clinic. This solar-powered facility provides essential healthcare services to over 2,500 residents, including internally displaced persons, enhancing community resilience and reducing the burden on other health facilities. Multilateral engagement. At the multilateral level, Malta has actively participated in collective efforts to support Ukraine. EU humanitarian aid. The European Union has allocated over 1.1 billion for humanitarian aid programs in Ukraine, with Malta contributing to these initiatives through various channels. Council of Europe Action Plan. Malta has provided contributions to the Council of Europe Action Plan for Ukraine 2023 and 2026, addressing critical issues related to strengthening Ukraine's resilience and protecting the human rights of its citizens during and after the conflict. Malta remains committed to supporting Ukraine through both direct assistance and collaborative international efforts. The country's proactive approach underscores its dedication to humanitarian principles and solidarity with the people of Ukraine during these times.
Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the United European Left, the co-chair of the party, Mr. George Loukaides.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Madam President, allow me to congratulate you on your speech, but also on Malta's recognition of the Palestinian state. Malta's presidency have emphasized the rule of law and fundamental rights. Yet across Europe, we see rising inequality, democratic backsliding, pressures on civil society, the climate crisis, and the advance of far-right forces, all threatening our values, our shared values. Could you share what concrete steps Malta has taken to embed climate and social justice, equality, and the protection of the most vulnerable?
Thank you, George. Madam President, would you like to respond?
During our presidency, we have placed the most vulnerable in society at the center of our work. This is reflected in the attention we have given throughout our presidency to the plight of victims of trafficking in human beings, children's rights, especially those who fall victim to sexual exploitation and abuse, and victims of gender-based violence. As champions of LGBTIQ rights, Malta has prioritized the protection of all individuals, irrespective of their gender. We have worked relentlessly towards the finalization of the Council of Ministers' recommendation on equal rights for intersex persons, which we look forward to launching later on this month. Speaking specifically on climate change, it is undeniable that an unhealthy environment and the challenges brought about by climate change pose significant risks to human beings. Addressing these matters requires a multi-stakeholder approach, bringing together national authorities, local authorities, and grassroots organizations. This point was central to the International Conference on multi-level governance approaches to address environmental challenges, held under our presidency, which focused on fostering cross-sector collaboration. Another key lesson from our presidency has been the importance of a whole-of-society approach when addressing issues related to human rights, the rule of law, and democracy, including active engagement of civil society and grassroots organizations. Youth plays a vital role in this regard, and they should be given more opportunities to influence policies. However, youth are not the only sector capable of contributing. As highlighted during the side event organized by the Maltese presidency at the All Digital Summit, it is crucial that the older generation is not left behind and also has a voice in addressing new and emerging challenges, such as those posed by digital technologies. In this context, the Building Democratic Resilience to Disinformation Conference, held in Malta on the 17th of September, was a crucial step in promoting awareness, cooperation, and practical solutions across generations, reinforcing the principles of democratic resilience and participatory governance. We look forward to continuing to cooperate with upcoming presidencies to ensure that the spirit of a whole-of-society approach and multi-stakeholder cooperation, which the Maltese presidency has sought to instill, endures.
Thank you, Madam President. Monica Bartos is next.
Thank you for the floor. Madam President, thank you for your presentation. As you mentioned, we are facing new challenges. Artificial intelligence is becoming an integral part of our lives. What is your view? Will protection of human rights in relating to artificial intelligence be able to compete with other sectors like competitiveness, or economic development? Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Monica. Madam President, would you like to respond?
Malta's message is clear. We remain firmly committed to a human-centric approach to emerging technologies. We are convinced that technology should not only serve as a driver of competitiveness and innovation, but must also be translated into responsible, citizen-focused policies that safeguard the common good. This is a principle we are determined to uphold both at the national and international level. Locally, our focus lies in strengthening education and training so that our citizens of all ages are equipped with the knowledge and skills to engage confidently with new technologies. Here at the Council of Europe, Malta is a proud supporter of the Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence and stands ready to continue promoting its adoption and implementation. In this regard, digital inclusion represents one of the greatest enablers of social and economic equity in our time. It is essential that digital inclusion efforts remain continuous and comprehensive, addressing differences in gender, age, economic status, abilities, and vulnerabilities. This is not merely a policy objective, it is a moral imperative.
Thank you, Madam President. Bisera Konstantinovska-Stojewska.
Madam President, for tens of years, we witnessed hardship, death, atrocities in the Middle East. Throughout these years, different governments in Malta supported the Palestinian cause and in favor of a two-state solution. Recently, Malta was one of the countries recognizing the state of Palestine. While denouncing the atrocities of 7th of October and the grave atrocities since then on Palestinians, in different international fora, Malta promoted permanent ceasefire, release of hostages, and peace at the earliest. How can Malta support these goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Bisera. Madam President, would you like to respond?
The current humanitarian crisis is a stain on our collective conscience. It signifies a failure on our part. We cannot allow the further killing of thousands of innocent people. Babies, children, youths, the elderly, and the frail to continue. We cannot turn our heads the other way because of other considerations. That is why we support our efforts towards an immediate ceasefire, unimpeded aid access, including to UNRWA, the protection of civilians in accordance with international law and in full respect of humanitarian principles, as well as international humanitarian law. This is something we have done both at the national and international levels. We were one of the first countries who expressed continued support to UNWRA, and we remain committed to provide humanitarian assistance to civilians in need, both in Malta and in Gaza. Considering the trajectory and scale of events throughout Gaza and the West Bank, the two-state solution is indeed facing an existential threat. We remain committed to a solution rooted in relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions and internationally agreed parameters, with pre-1967 borders and Jerusalem as the capital of both states. It is with this in mind that Malta announced its formal recognition of the State of Palestine at UNGA with the intent of joining other countries in a concrete step towards safeguarding the wider Middle East peace process to preserve a political horizon.
Honourable President of the Republic of Malta, I want warmly to thank you for your speech, for answering questions that my colleagues have raised to you. And of course, I want to thank Malta for its presidency. We are honored to have you here. Thanks once again. Dear colleagues, the Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. with the agenda approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned.